The sky above Alhura, seven shimmered like a living canvas, bathed in hues of violet and gold as twin suns set behind the towering peaks of the Seer Mountains. Beneath the celestial light, the sacred arena, known as the Temple of the Last Stand, loomed, its marble columns etched with millennia of history, their surfaces alive with glowing inscriptions that pulsed with ancient power. All around the arena, the air hummed with the sound of anticipation. 1,000 different species, each unique in form and nature, gathered in a dazzling spectacle of diversity. Among them were the towering Xylo, beings of liquid stone whose bodies rippled with the currents of the planet's magnetic fields. Nearby, a group of Elsari, an ethereal race of translucent, floating beings meditated in the air, their forms barely visible against the golden hue of the sunset. A pod of Krishna, amphibious life forms with 3 sets of eyes and bioluminescent skin, communicated in a series of harmonic songs, their voices echoing like whispers of the ocean. The Temple of the Last Stand was not just any arena. It was an ancient holy site, revered across the galaxy for its connection to the primordial forces of the universe. It was said to be where the gods once walked, and where their trials were fought. Every century, the most devout and powerful warriors from across the galaxy gathered here, not for a tournament of glory, but for something far more profound, a test of faith, of spirit, and of resolve. This was no mere contest of strength. This was a ritual. The stakes were higher than any battle. Those who passed the trial were not only granted eternal honor, but the right to shape the future of the universe itself. Their faith, their belief, and their strength would echo through the stars, influencing the course of civilizations for generations to come. A booming voice echoed across the grounds, reverberating off the temple's ancient walls. Warriors, to your stations. The last stand of faith is upon us. The assembled species fell silent, their collective breath held as the arena's force fields activated, casting a shimmering barrier over the vast expanse. The contenders, warriors from every corner of the galaxy, took their positions, each stepping into the sacred circle with a mixture of reverence and resolve. Among them was a lone figure, a human named Yara, the first of her kind ever to be invited to participate. Yara stood at the edge of the arena, her posture steady despite the weight of history pressing down upon her. She was an outlier here, her human form a stark contrast to the many beings she stood among. Her skin was pale, her eyes the deep blue of Earth's oceans, and though her body was small compared to the towering Xylo, there was a fire in her heart that burned brighter than anything she had ever known. It was her faith, her unshakable belief in something greater, that had brought her to this point. The crowd stirred in quiet excitement as the first bell tolled, signaling the beginning of the trial. The air crackled with energy, and Yara took her first step forward. The trials had begun. It would be a test like no other, and in this sacred place, there could be no turning back. The Yara's footsteps echoed softly as she approached the center of the temple's preparation grounds. The other warriors were already deep in concentration, meditating, channeling energies, and preparing their minds for the trials ahead. Most were adorned in elaborate armor, ritualistic garb, or glowing sigils that pulsed with ancient power. Their presence was imposing. Each one a towering figure of strength, honor, and mysticism, their minds sharp as blades honed over centuries. Then there was Yara. She stood out, not because she was particularly short or human, though both were certainly glaringly apparent, but because of her approach. Instead of huddling in focused silence like the others, she sat cross-legged on the ground, rummaging through her bag. She pulled out a well-worn journal, flipping through the pages to find the last entry she had written before arriving. She muttered to herself in a low voice, "Let's see, make sure I don't forget to send a message to Mom after this. And check if the ship's sensors are calibrated. Always double-check." A few of the Velsari glanced over, their translucent forms rippling with mild curiosity, but no one dared approach her. She didn't seem bothered by the attention. "All right," Yara said aloud, snapping the journal shut and standing up. She adjusted the simple, practical outfit she wore. Nothing like the gilded armor or sacred robes of the others. Just a basic jumpsuit from the Federation, still speckled with the dust of interstellar travel. Guess it's go time. While the other contenders were projecting radiant auras of power and poise, Yara simply stretched, yawning, and gave a half-hearted wave to a few competitors she recognized. "Hey, anyone have a good strategy for this thing?" I mean, I know it's all about faith and spirit and all that, but does anyone know if there's a place to grab some food after this? There was a ripple of surprise among the surrounding warriors. A few exchanged glances, some chuckling in disbelief, others narrowing their multifaceted eyes in confusion. The Xylo warrior standing next to Yara, an imposing figure made entirely of shifting stone, turned to her with a deep rumble. "You, human, are you not aware of the sanctity of the last stand of faith?" Its voice vibrated through the air. Yara grinned, as unfazed as ever. "Oh, I'm aware. Honestly, I've read all the stories. The last stand of faith, the chosen warriors, sacred trials of the universe. You know the ones. I just think it's a bit overhyped. But hey, if it gets me into some new cultures and maybe a good meal, I'm in." The Xylo's glowing eyes flickered with something akin to bewilderment. Then a slow, grinding laugh rumbled from within its stone chest. The energy around it seemed to shift, just for a moment, as if even the laws of nature had to adjust to Yara's complete lack of ceremony. "Unbelievable," muttered a floating Velsari nearby, their form vibrating in what could only be interpreted as amusement. "She does not even grasp the gravity of this moment." Yara just shrugged, reaching into her bag again to pull out a small packet of protein bars. "Gravity's overrated. Besides, I'm not here for the glory. I'm here for the challenge." She looked at the glowing marks on the Velsari's form. "So, you guys been doing this for long?" While others remained in their ceremonial reverence, Yara continued on, oblivious to the gazes of confusion and judgment. The time for meditation and deep rituals was not hers. Hers was a way of the outsider, the unconventional. Her faith wasn't rooted in age-old traditions, but in an unshakable belief that her own will and adaptability would carry her through. As she stood, stretching once more, Yara's eyes glinted with the quiet confidence of someone who was more at home in the chaos of the unknown than in any preordained path. And that was exactly why she was here, because no one expected her to be. No one could have predicted a human, a newcomer to these ancient trials, would even get this far. But she had, and she would stand as the wild card in this trial of faith, ready to prove that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in tradition, but in breaking from it. "All right," she said with a wink to the nearby Velsari. "Let's see if I can pull off the impossible, yeah?" The arena vibrated as the bell rang, signaling the beginning of the trial. The air buzzed with expectation. But Yara's casual smile was unwavering. She stepped into the sacred circle, her faith not in what had been, but in what could be. And just like that, she had already begun to defy everything they thought they knew. The ancient bell rang 3 times, its resonating chimes echoing through the sacred temple of the last stand. The moment had arrived. Yara stood in the center of the vast arena, her hands tucked casually into her pockets, feeling the weight of the moment pressed down on her. The crowd, a sea of diverse alien species, fell into an expectant silence. Each and every one of them had gathered for the singular event, the culmination of millennia of tradition, and she, the only human, was about to face the most revered and fearsome warrior in the galaxy, High Priestess Azraya, the living embodiment of ancient discipline and sacred martial prowess. Azraya's entrance was nothing short of magnificent. She strode into the arena with the grace of divine being, her long, shimmering robes flowing like liquid light. Her skin was an ethereal shade of deep purple, and her eyes glowed with a soft, golden hue that spoke of years spent in quiet contemplation and unbroken devotion to the ancient ways. Her every movement was fluid and precise, like a perfect symphony being performed by the cosmos itself. For centuries, Azraya had been undefeated in the last stand of faith. She was more than just a warrior. She was a living legend, her name whispered in awe and reverence across the galaxy. She had undergone countless trials, emerging victorious each time, her faith and skill unchallenged. To face her was to face tradition itself. Yara, by contrast, seemed almost an afterthought. Her practical jumpsuit and unpolished demeanor were in stark contrast to Azraya's regal presence. While Azraya had devoted her life to mastering sacred combat techniques passed down through generations, Yara was a relative newcomer, a wild card, untested and unrefined, a human who had wandered into this ancient ritual with little more than a sarcastic grin and a lot of curiosity. The arena was quiet, the tension building to an almost unbearable degree. The challengers were not here just to fight. They were here to prove their faith, to demonstrate unwavering devotion to the principles of the universe itself. For Azariah, this was a matter of maintaining the ancient balance, ensuring continuance of the old ways. For Yara, it was a test of adaptability, a belief in the power of individual will to break tradition and forge new paths. Azariah raised her hand slowly, her voice like a divine whisper as she addressed the crowd. This trial is sacred. It is not a game. It is not for glory. It is for the preservation of the truths that govern the universe. This human's presence here is a violation of those truths. I will demonstrate why. Yara, unfazed, cracked her knuckles casually, muttering under her breath, Yeah, whatever. Show me what you got." The crowd gasped. Azariah's golden eyes narrowed, the slightest flicker of disdain crossing her face. She had faced countless challenges in her long life, but never had someone spoken with such disregard. Her reputation for unwavering composure was renowned. This human, this outsider, would be an interesting test of her resolve. And yet, despite her apparent superiority, Azariah was not above the slightest hint of doubt. She knew that the spirit of the last stand was unpredictable. In all her years of trial, she had never faced someone like this before. Someone who defied the very essence of what the challenge stood for. The bell rang once more, signaling the start of the first phase. The ground beneath their feet began to hum with ancient energy as the temple's force fields activated, surrounding the combatants with an impenetrable barrier. The trial had begun, and with it, the odds were unmistakably stacked against Yara. Azariah stood poised, her hands raised in the ceremonial position of her order, ready to unleash a series of sacred techniques that had taken her centuries to perfect. The air around her shimmered with energy, as though the very fabric of the universe bent to her will. Yara, however, was already walking toward her with an expression of amusement. "So, is this where you throw some glowing stuff at me, or is this more of a hands-on kind of thing?" A collective shudder rippled through the audience. Azariah's calm facade remained, but internally, she could feel a new, uncomfortable sensation. The old ways, so long revered and perfected, had never been tested like this. A challenger who didn't respect the sacredness of the trial. A challenger who wasn't here to prove anything to anyone but herself. This was no ordinary fight. This was a clash between two worlds, two ideologies, and the galaxy would be watching to see which would come out on top. The stakes were higher than ever before. It was not just a battle of strength. It was a battle of faith. And in that moment, Azariah realized just how dangerous Yara's approach could be. Yara stood in the center of the arena, seemingly unfazed by the weight of the moment. While Azariah remained motionless, her posture radiating sacred composure, Yara was busy doing, well, something far less ceremonial. She glanced around, making sure the distant buzz of the crowd wasn't too overwhelming. With a determined nod, she bent down and removed her worn shoes, placing them gently by the side of the arena. "Okay, I'll need good footing for this," she mumbled, a slight grin tugging at the corners of her lips. Some of the spectators, including a few Velsari, tilted their heads in confusion. "What is she doing?" one whispered, their transparent form flickering slightly in disbelief. Yara gave an exaggerated stretch, cracking her neck as she stood back up. "All right, warm-up time." She began bouncing on her heels, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, almost like she was testing out an old pair of shoes. Azariah, having stood in absolute silence until now, raised an eyebrow as Yara started to do jumping jacks. Yes, jumping jacks. The type you'd find in a human gym. Jumping jacks. In the middle of one of the most sacred trials in the galaxy. A few warriors exchanged bewildered looks. One of the towering Xylo glanced at a fellow competitor and grumbled in a low, gravelly tone, "Is this her preparation?" Yara's legs began to pick up speed, her arms reaching over her head with an enthusiastic rhythm, her face completely deadpan. "Gotta get the blood flowing, you know?" "This is madness," whispered one of the Velsari, their form vibrating in confusion. "She will fail without a doubt." But Yara was on a roll. She had no time for their disbelief. She threw in some burpees next, falling into a squat, then lunged her body out into a full push-up position before springing back up with a cheer. Yeah, feels good. I'm ready now. The other contenders in the arena, especially the elder, more traditionally trained beings, stared at her as if she were a wild animal on display. Azraya's golden eyes never wavered from the human, but internally, she found herself baffled. What kind of unrefined creature was this? This wasn't the way of the ancient trials. There were sacred rituals, forms to follow, discipline. A slight tremor moved through Azraya's composed frame, but she held herself steady. It was clear now that this was no ordinary human. The galaxy had underestimated her. Meanwhile, Yara, blissfully unaware of her audience's shocked stares, reached for a bottle of water and took a casual sip, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. You know, she said, almost to no one in particular, I was expecting, a lot more cosmic energy beams or, I don't know, floating rocks or something. A deep, rumbling voice from the xylo nearby called out, You mocked the sacred trials. Yara waved a hand dismissively. Mocking? Nah, just trying to keep it real. I mean, what is all this stuff anyway? She gestured at the shimmering symbols glowing in the air around them. Why not throw in a little yoga or a jog before the big showdown? Azraya's voice sliced through the air, calm but filled with the weight of authority. This trial is the embodiment of centuries of tradition, human. It is not to be trifled with. Yara flashed her a grin, completely unbothered. Oh, I'm not trifling with anything. I'm just getting in the zone. With that, she performed a series of exaggerated stretches, bending to touch her toes, twisting her torso, and even pulling off some awkward lunges. It's all about that limber flexibility, right? The crowd, a mix of awestruck and confused, couldn't help but laugh. Even as Raya's expression faltered for just a moment as she watched Yara, her traditional combat stance now seemingly ridiculous in the face of the humans' carefree preparations. A few of the Velsari, who had never seen anything so unpredictable in all their millennia, began to hum softly in what seemed to be the sound of amusement. You know, Yara continued as she finished up her warm-up routine with a deep breath. I'm thinking I might also do a quick stretch between rounds, just so I don't pull a muscle or something. Gotta stay in peak condition for the whole saving the universe thing, right? Azraya's eyes flashed with an edge of irritation now. Do not mistake my patience for weakness, human. Oh, I don't think I am, Yara said, her voice calm, yet carrying a hint of playful challenge. But I'll tell you one thing. You've got style. It's just not my style. With a final wink to the arena, Yara stepped confidently toward the center of the sacred circle. The crowd was now fully engaged, some in disbelief, others in admiration, and a few, like the Xylo, in utter confusion. This was not the warrior they expected. But that was exactly the point. Yara had defied every tradition in the book, and the greatest test had yet to begin. Unconventional? Absolutely. But one thing was clear. Yara was ready. The arena had now become a battleground like no other. Yara had already dispatched 3 opponents in a fashion that left the galaxy scratching its collective head in disbelief. Her first match had been against a Kornai warrior, a massive being whose body was composed of shifting liquid metal. This opponent, known for being able to reshape his form at will, was a terror on the battlefield. He had crushed his previous contenders effortlessly with his ability to form jagged spikes from his own body, stabbing them with pinpoint precision. But Yara wasn't intimidated. No, she wasn't impressed either. As the match began, the Kornai charged with a terrifying roar, shifting his arms into razor-sharp blades. He slashed at Yara with lightning speed, his metallic limbs leaving a trail of sparks in the air. The crowd tensed, certain that this was going to be over in seconds. But Yara, she didn't even flinch. Instead, she sidestepped with the casual grace of someone avoiding a speeding car, and then began jogging in circles around him. Come on, buddy, you can do better than that, she yelled, her voice carrying a tone of playful mockery. The Kornai's liquid body shimmered as he twisted to follow her movements, his eyes narrowing. Frustrated by her evasiveness, he lunged again, slashing downward. Yara, with a sudden burst of speed, dropped to the ground and rolled under him, popping back up with a grin. Okay, she said, wiping her forehead dramatically. That was almost a workout. The crowd gasped. The Kornai growled, his form twisting in fury, and launched a rapid barrage of metallic spikes. But Yara, still casually trotting, pulled out a distracting tool, a tiny handheld mirror. She angled it to reflect the arena's artificial sunlight directly into the Kornai's eyes. For a moment, the Kornai was blinded, his body faltering in mid-motion. In that precious window, Yara darted in, landed a swift kick to his core, and the warrior crumpled to the ground, incapacitated by the sheer absurdity of it all. The crowd was silent at first, then erupted into chaos, a mix of confusion and reluctant applause. Yara waved her hand dismissively. What? I learned that from watching an older spy movie. The second match was against a creature of living shadow, a being who could stretch and distort its form at will, disappearing into the darkness of the arena. The whispers of the crowd grew louder. This was the real test. Yara was facing an entity whose very nature bent the rules of reality. As the shadow being reared up, it twisted into a writhing mass of darkness, its tendrils stretching out to strike. But Yara wasn't panicked. She wasn't even fazed. Instead, she pulled out something completely unexpected, a flashlight. "Let's see how you like the light," she called out, flicking the switch and bathing the arena in a blinding artificial beam. The shadows shrieked, recoiling as the light forced its form to distort. Yara smirked. "Ah, the classic battle against the dark move. Works every time." The being writhed in pain as the flashlight caught it at its weakest, forcing it into solid form long enough for Yara to jump in and land a firm punch right where its core should have been. The shadow entity dissipated into thin air, leaving the crowd in stunned silence once again. 2 for 2, Yara muttered to herself as she dusted off her hands. You know, at this point, I'm thinking they should just let me carry the tools I need for each match. Makes life way easier. Her final match before the semifinals was against an Xylo warrior, one of the most ancient species in the galaxy. The Xylo were revered for their psionic abilities and their ability to control the elements around them. The fighter in question was known for conjuring storms, manipulating winds, and even creating shields of force with mere thought. This was a serious contender. This was tradition. Yara stood across from him, sizing him up. The crowd could feel the shift in the air as the Xylo's presence intensified. They could see the faint shimmer of energy forming around his body. He was preparing to unleash his full power. Yara, on the other hand, wasn't even looking at him. Instead, she was doing something no one expected. She was texting on her communication device. The crowd was nearly silent as the Xylo struck first, summoning a gust of wind that could level buildings. The air swirled with power, and the ground beneath Yara's feet trembled. He reached out, his hands glowing with psionic energy, and sent a torrent of wind hurtling toward her. And Yara? She didn't even break her focus from her screen. With a bored sigh, she tapped the device again, then pressed a button. A laser pointer appeared in her hand. Okay, let's make this quick," she said, flicking the laser's red onto the Xylo's chest. "Guess you're not that strong," she said with a wink, resting casually on the defeated Xylo as the crowd exploded in a mixture of bewilderment and reluctant admiration. Yara was a whirlwind of unpredictability. In each match, she had proven that while tradition and sacred techniques might be formidable, nothing could prepare the galaxy for the chaos of human ingenuity. With every victory, the crowd grew more and more unsure. Was it possible? Could this human really win the last stand of faith? Azraya, Grand Master of the Sacred Trials, stood silently in her private chamber, watching the live feeds of the matches. The lights of the arena flickered in the reflection of her dark eyes, her regal posture unwavering. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, a growing unease began to churn. The first match had been impressive. Yara had defeated the Kornai, a warrior whose metal body had felled countless competitors. But that wasn't what bothered Azraya. What unsettled her was the way Yara had done it, by jogging circles around him, distracting him with a mirror, and landing a swift blow. It was unrefined, chaotic. It was not combat, not true combat, but it was effective. Azraya tightened her jaw as the second match unfolded. Yara faced a shadow being, a creature that had effortlessly defeated its previous opponents, using its mastery over darkness. And what did Yara do? She used a flashlight. Azariah watched as the crowd gasped and laughed, the tension in the air dissipating as Yara continued to shine the beam in the creature's eyes. The shadow being had been overwhelmed, forced into a physical form long enough for the human to strike. How could this be? Azariah thought, her golden eyes narrowing. This human is trivializing the sacred art of combat. The concept of the sacred trials was built on discipline, on the reverence of ancient traditions, the merging of mind, body, and spirit in harmony with the cosmos. The trials tested one's ability to adapt, but it was always done within the strict boundaries of honor and ritual. Yara is not following the sacred path. Azariah thought, she is breaking every tradition we hold dear. Yet, as Azariah watched Yara's final victory over the Xylo warrior, she could feel the knot in her chest tighten. The laser pointer, the simplicity of it, had been the final insult. The Xylo had been caught off guard, unable to focus on anything other than the absurdity of the device. But the true devastation, Azariah realized, wasn't just in Yara's victory. It was in the implications of it. This was no longer about strength or technique. It was about something far more dangerous: unpredictability. Yara's refusal to follow tradition, her casual approach to combat, was a direct challenge to everything Azariah had fought for. Every fight in the sacred trials had been a carefully choreographed dance of power, respect, and ritual. To see someone, especially a human, trivialize that was an affront to all Azariah had worked to preserve. Azariah's hand clenched into a fist, her mind racing. Why is she not bound by the same rules? She wondered. Her victories are a mockery of everything we hold sacred. Azariah's thoughts drifted back to the core of the trials. The tradition was not just about physical prowess. It was about mastering oneself, showing the universe that the greatest strength came from balance, from wisdom, from understanding the deep forces that govern all life. And yet Yara was winning not through deep understanding or power, but through improvisation, through chaos. Azariah paced the room, the soft glow of the arena lights casting long shadows. The trials have been unchallenged for millennia. The sacred combat has always adhered to the same standards. There was no room for chaos. There was no room for disruption. But now, for the first time in her life, Azariah felt the sharp sting of doubt. Is it possible that this human might actually win? She paused, her breath steadying as she looked once more at Yara's image, standing victorious in the arena, her human quirks shining through in every moment. No, Azariah thought, her eyes hardening. It cannot be. This is her limit. No one can truly break the traditions and walk away unscathed. The screen flickered as Yara's next match approached. The thought of facing her in the final match loomed over Azariah's mind. If the human continued this path, the very foundation of the trials would be threatened. The sanctity of combat, of tradition, was in jeopardy. Azariah's expression hardened, a thin line of resolve settling across her features. She was not a grandmaster for nothing. She had faced countless trials, defeated untold adversaries, and stood as the epitome of tradition. But as she watched Yara's carefree antics in the arena, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind, what if she's right? What if there's another way? Azariah shook her head. No, Yara had only gotten this far by defying tradition, by bending rules. And if she was to face her in the final round, Azariah would ensure the trials ended the way they were meant to, through discipline, honor, and the true spirit of combat. As Azariah stood tall, she muttered under her breath, the human's unpredictability will be her downfall. I will show her that tradition will always prevail. But deep inside, a whisper of uncertainty lingered. Would tradition win? Or would the chaos of a human's unconventional path shatter the old ways forever? The stage was set for a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever as the final round of sacred trials loomed. The air around the arena had thickened with anticipation. The crowds, once curious, now buzzed with something else: uncertainty. Whispers echoed through the stands as the Grandmaster's loyal followers exchanged concerned glances. Yara's unorthodox victories had shattered the sacred norms of the trials, and with each round, her methods became more and more baffling to those who had expected tradition and discipline to triumph. In the grand halls of the arena, officials murmured nervously among themselves. The betting markets had frozen, their screens flashing the words, "Error does not compute." It wasn't just disbelief, it was dismay. How could a human, someone with no discernible technique or mastery over the traditional ways, have advanced this far. And now, as Yara stepped into the preparation chamber for the final match, the tension was palpable. Her unrefined, chaotic style had taken down creatures from across the galaxy, each one an ancient powerhouse in their own right. Yet her methods defied every law of combat that had governed the sacred trials for millennia. What was she doing? Jogging circles around a metal beast? Distracting a shadow being with a flashlight? And now, she was about to face Azraya, the very personification of tradition and discipline. The crowd was divided. Some cheered for Yara, the rebellious underdog. Others, the more conservative members of the galactic elite, could barely hide their disdain. This human, who dared to laugh in the face of tradition, had made a mockery of the trials. Yet despite their reservations, even they couldn't help but admire her unpredictable brilliance. Spectators across the galaxy tuned in, their screens flickering with uncertainty. The odds had long since been reset. Yara was now the wild card, a statistical anomaly that no one knew how to calculate. The betting lines were practically useless. The galaxy's greatest minds couldn't fathom how a human had made it to this point, much less how she had won. On the other side, Azraya, in her private chambers, prepared herself for the inevitable clash. The weight of centuries of tradition hung heavily on her shoulders. She had dedicated her life to the sacred art of the trials, honing her skills to perfection. Now, she was faced with a human who had no respect for the customs that had shaped her entire existence. Yet, despite her unwavering resolve, there was a flicker of doubt in her heart. Yara's victories weren't accidental. They weren't random chaos. There was something intuitive about her, something that Azraya couldn't quite place. As she watched Yara from the private monitors, her unease grew. The final arena was ready, a colossal structure that seemed to vibrate with the weight of history. Every match had led to this moment, the moment where the old ways would either prove their superiority or be forever shattered. As Yara stepped onto the battlefield, the crowd fell silent. Azraya, standing in the opposite corner, was a figure of poise and serenity, her ceremonial robes shimmering with every movement. The contrast between the two could not have been starker. Yara, standing with her hands on her hips and an expression that suggested she was about to attend a casual picnic, looked like she was there just for fun. And in a way, maybe she was. "Is this really happening?" one of the spectators whispered, looking to their companion for reassurance. This human, this wild card, is about to face Azraya in the final? She's going to destroy everything. The response came in a hushed tone. She already has. Azraya's traditions are based on centuries of combat, but this human, she's rewriting the rules in real time. Across the arena, the officiants whispered among themselves. Some feared what this meant for the future of the trials. Others, more curious, were eager to see if Yara could truly break the tradition, or if Azraya would demonstrate the might of 1,000 generations. The starting bell rang, and the air crackled with the anticipation of the final showdown. Azraya's eyes narrowed as she sized up her opponent. This was it. All her years of training, all the history of the sacred trials, had led to this one defining moment. But Yara wasn't showing the slightest sign of intimidation. In fact, she looked more like she was preparing to enjoy a good challenge. Yara cracked her knuckles and grinned. "You ready, princess?" she called across the arena. A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd. Then a shocked silence. No one had ever dared speak like that to Azraya before. Azraya's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. The time for words was over. She would show the galaxy the true meaning of tradition. But as the first strike was thrown, Azraya's precise, devastating force against Yara's unpredictable dodge, something remarkable happened. Yara did not follow any expected pattern. She didn't block the attack with a shield or retaliate with a counterstrike. She simply moved, unpredictably, fluidly, a twist of her body, a quick sidestep, and Azraya's blow missed entirely. The crowd gasped. How was this possible? Azraya, the living legend of the trials, had just missed a direct strike. And Yara? She didn't even seem fazed. In fact, she looked entertained. Yara grinned. "Is that all you got? I've had harder fights with my little brother." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't just a match. This was a statement. The galaxy had always viewed combat as a disciplined, sacred art. Yara was proving that it could also be something else, something much more free-form, dynamic, and unpredictable. As the battle raged on, it became clear the stakes had never been higher. Would the long-held traditions of the sacred trials endure, or would Yara's chaotic approach, her human ingenuity, forge a new path in the galaxy's history? Spectators whispered nervously as they watched, holding their breaths. The outcome wasn't just about a fight anymore. It was about the future. The very foundation of their sacred combat was on the line. And as Yara's unorthodox tactics continued to challenge the rules of combat, the question lingered in the air. What would happen if tradition fell? The final round of the sacred trials had arrived. The arena trembled with anticipation as the Grand Masters of Combat, Azraya and Yara, stood on opposite sides of the colossal battlefield. The air crackled with tension, the weight of millennia tradition pressing down on Azraya's every movement, while Yara seemed unbothered, stretching lazily as if she were preparing for a sparring match with a friend. On one side, Azraya exuded the calm of a seasoned warrior, her every step graceful, every motion precise. Her robe shimmered with centuries of honor and power, each fold of her garment a symbol of the trials she had endured. She was an embodiment of tradition, ancient, unyielding, flawless. Her eyes narrowed as she focused on her opponent, reading every movement with the meticulous calculation of a true master. On the other side, Yara, human, unpredictable, and irreverently casual, cracked her knuckles and grinned. She stood with her legs apart, as if preparing to play a game of dodgeball, a far cry from the usual reverence shown by the galactic competitors. But she was more than ready. A simple, confident smile spread across her face. "So," Yara called across the arena, "you the big shot, huh? Let's see if your tradition can keep up with a little chaos." The arena, a vast expanse of polished black stone and shimmering energy fields, glowed in the stillness. Above, alien spectators from 100 worlds waited in breathless silence, their eyes locked on combatants. The bell rang, echoing through the arena. Azraya made the first move, her movements a blur of calculated grace. Her hands glowed with ethereal energy as she formed a series of intricate gestures, summoning beams of energy that coiled around her like serpents of light. With a single motion, she unleashed them in a sharp, deadly arc aimed directly at Yara. Yara didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, looking up at the incoming beams with a bemused expression. "Is that all you've got?" Yara grinned, spinning on her heel and suddenly sprinting in the opposite direction, narrowly dodging the energy blasts. The beams crackled against the arena's force fields, fizzling out with a burst of energy. Azraya's face hardened. She hadn't expected the human to dodge so effortlessly. Yara wasn't trying to block or deflect the attack. She was just avoiding it. "Typical," Azraya muttered, her eyes narrowing. She wasn't used to her opponents running away from battle. But Yara was already back on her feet, and before Azraya could prepare her next strike, Yara had done something that made the crowd gasp. Yara pulled out a small device from her belt, an ordinary handheld camera. She aimed it at Azraya and clicked the shutter. A holographic image of Azraya's image appeared in front of her, frozen in time. "What?" Azraya's brow furrowed as she saw her image in a still frame, her energy constructs appearing suspended in midair. Yara grinned and tapped the hologram. "Oh, just want to get a selfie." "Hold still, will ya?" Azraya's eyes flashed with anger, but before she could react, Yara dashed forward, closing the distance with unnatural speed, weaving through the air like a whirlwind. Azraya's practiced defenses, energy shields, laser beams, and telekinetic barriers, fizzled out in the face of Yara's erratic movements. With a swift motion, Yara flung a glowing sphere, her own trick, straight at Azraya's shield. The sphere collided with the force field, causing a burst of energy that ricocheted and exploded in all directions. Azraya staggered back, her shield barely holding up against the unpredictable assault. Yara took the opportunity to vault over her opponent, flipping backward in midair with a casual grin. "Did I mention I'm a pro at this? Been dodging laser tag for years." Yara smirked, her voice filled with mock nonchalance. The crowd erupted in mixed laughter and gasps. They had expected this fight to be a contest of precision and form. Instead, they were witnessing something they had never imagined, a human challenging the greatest of the greats with nothing more than sheer adaptability and chaotic improvisation. Azraya's lips tightened as her calm demeanor cracked. She was losing control of the battle, something she'd never allowed to happen. Her next move was swift and precise. Her energy construct swirled around her, forming an intricate web of glowing shapes, each one more intricate and beautiful than the last. With a series of calculated gestures, she sent them flying in rapid succession toward Yara. But Yara wasn't there. She was already on the move again, sprinting and cartwheeling in a series of unpredictable directions. A laser beam missed her by inches, another blast hitting the arena wall behind her. "Come on, Azraya," Yara said with a grin. "You gotta get with the times. How about this?" Without warning, Yara reached into her pack and pulled out what looked like a simple kitchen blender. The device hummed to life, and she aimed it at Azraya, sending a burst of harmless, swirling mist into the air. The mist quickly dissipated, but Azraya's concentration faltered for a split second as the swirling vortex disoriented her. "See," Yara quipped, "sometimes you just need to think outside the box." Azraya's expression twisted, her face a storm of frustration and focus. This was madness. She had trained a millennia to master the ancient ways, to embody order, and yet here she was facing a human who refused to follow any of the established rules. It was a mockery of everything she stood for. But then something shifted. Azraya paused for just a heartbeat, gathering her strength. She had underestimated Yara before, but no more. This human had fought in her own way, sure, but Azraya knew the art of combat better than anyone else. This is where tradition will show its power, Azraya thought. With a deep, controlled breath, she unleashed her full force, summoning a brilliant, radiant storm of light that seemed to fill the entire arena. It was an attack she'd used countless times before, sacred, powerful, and flawless. But this time, Yara didn't dodge. Instead, she laughed. "Okay, time for Plan B." She shouted, pulling out a simple umbrella. She twirled it once, holding it like a knight's sword, and charged straight into the storm. Azraya's jaw dropped. With a wild grin, Yara swung the umbrella forward, and the light storm bent around her. It was a moment of sheer absurdity, but somehow it worked. The power seemed to recoil off her improvised weapon, scattered by the unpredictable force of her motion. Azraya stood frozen, her concentration broken. Yara, still grinning, came to stop inches from Azraya. Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "Well, that was fun," Yara said with a shrug. "What's next?" Azraya could only stare at her opponent, a mix of disbelief and awe creeping into her chest. This human, this complete anomaly, had done the impossible. She had won. The arena fell into a stunned silence, and with that, the last of the sacred trials had been forever altered. Yara, with her chaotic energy, had broken the old ways, proving that adaptability, humor, and a touch of insanity could defeat even the mightiest tradition. The arena was silent as Yara stood victorious, her chest rising and falling in the wake of the epic battle. The ground beneath her feet hummed with the residual energy of Azraya's final, failed storm of light. In the distance, the crowd had fallen into stunned stillness, unsure of how to process what had just occurred. Azraya, still in her stance, slowly lowered her hand, the glow around her flickering as she stood in quiet contemplation. Her pristine robes were singed, and her face bore the weight of disbelief. She had fought with everything she had, the ancient arts, the traditions, the history. Yet it wasn't enough. Not against this. Yara, on the other hand, was still holding her umbrella like a trophy. Her grin, unshaken by the enormity of the moment, was laced with humor and something deeper, an understanding that perhaps she had been the disruptor. The high officials of the sacred trials, the ancient judges of this galaxy-spanning contest, hovered in the air above the arena, their eyes wide as they observed the unthinkable outcome. They had seen many victories, many champions, but this was something new. Finally, the silence was broken by a voice, not from the spectators, but from Azraya herself. You shattered everything. she said quietly, but not with anger. It was more of a realization, a slow acceptance. Yara's grin softened, and she looked Azariah in the eyes. I didn't break anything. I just use it differently. Maybe there's more than one way to win, you know? You don't always need to follow the rules if you can find your own. Azariah took a deep breath. For a moment, her features softened. The hard edges of tradition that had defined her identity seemed to waver. I trained my entire life to uphold a perfect form, she said, almost to herself. I thought that perfection could never be challenged. Yara tilted her head, adjusting her umbrella over her shoulder. Perfection's overrated. Look at all the crazy stuff that happened when you let go of it. The universe isn't all about precision. Sometimes it's about improvisation, adaptation, and a little bit of luck. A chuckle rippled through the arena as Yara's words echoed across the vastness. It wasn't just the spectators who were laughing. The officials and even some of the other competitors who had watched the fight began to murmur in agreement. Yara's unconventional approach had opened their minds, made them reconsider what truly defined a warrior. Azariah, her stoic facade cracking, nodded. I have spent too much time trying to be perfect. Maybe it is time to evolve. The head official, a being of ancient cosmic knowledge, floated down to the center of the arena, his voice amplified for all to hear. This fight will be remembered not for the victory, but for what it represents. The balance of combat, tradition, and adaptation has been irrevocably changed. No longer will the sacred trials remain an arena for only the flawless. The new generation has arrived. Yara blinked, a bit stunned. Wow! Didn't think my umbrella would do that much. The official smiled, a rare occurrence for one so old and revered. Sometimes, the simplest tools change the course of history. As the crowd slowly erupted in applause, Yara turned to Azariah, who gave her a single respectful bow. I may not have won by your methods, but you've given me something invaluable, a new perspective. Same here, Yara replied with a wink. Maybe one day you'll teach me how to do the perfect spin kick. But for now, I think I'll stick to my umbrella tricks. Azariah smiled, an honest, unguarded smile that was a rare gift in the galaxy's harshest traditions. As Yara exited the arena, the crowd still in awe, the impact of her victory sank in. This was more than just one human defeating an ancient champion. It was a breaking of a long-held mindset. The rigid laws of tradition had been challenged, not with force, but with something far more revolutionary: creativity. For Yara, this battle wasn't about becoming the best. It was about showing that the old ways didn't always have to reign. Sometimes, the universe needed fresh ideas, new ways of thinking. And most of all, it needed the courage to throw away the rule book and rewrite it. The galaxy, now aware of this new force, watched as the ripple effect of Yara's unconventional methods would echo across civilizations, inspiring countless others to think outside the rigid boxes of tradition. Adaptability, improvisation, humor, they had become the new weapons of change. As Yara sipped from a water bottle backstage, the noise of the arena still reverberating in the distance, she muttered to herself with a satisfied grin. Guess the universe just needed a little chaos after all. And as the stars above shimmered in approval, the galaxy, once defined by tradition, would never be quite the same again as Yara made her way through the corridors. Still buzzing from a victory, a holographic message flickered to life before her, a transmission from the Galactic Council, no less. Yara Callian. The voice boomed, a deep and measured tone emanating from the hologram. Your actions have disrupted the sacred order of the trials, but your victory has also opened doors previously thought sealed. The universe is watching. Yara smirked, tapping her umbrella against the floor. Great, what's next? Another tournament. The hologram shifted, revealing the face of a high-ranking official, his features a blend of curiosity and caution. We have a unique opportunity for you. An invitation to the Vanguard Council, where the brightest minds across galaxies convene to decide the future of our order. Future the order? Yara raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. Sounds like a lot of rules. I'm in. Before the transmission could continue, a second hologram materialized, this time a younger, more disheveled-looking figure. Don't listen to them, he shouted, clearly panicked. They've been watching you for months. They know about you, about your potential. If you join them, they'll try to control you. You need to stop them before they get too far. Yara looked between the two projections, a mix of amusement and curiosity on her face. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. The voice of the first hologram returned, more insistent. Do not listen to that rogue. This is your path forward. The galaxy needs someone like you, someone who can redefine the future. Yara paused, tapping her umbrella thoughtfully. Yeah, I get it. But, if you really want me to reshape the future, you might want to leave a little more room for improvisation. The message flickered and then cut off abruptly. Silence settled around her as the weight of what was compressed down on her shoulders. The arena, the battles, and everything she had known now felt like a distant memory. Far beyond the trials, unknown forces were already plotting. The old order was no more, and new alliances, hidden agendas, and untold powers were beginning to stir across the stars. Yara had ignited a fire, one that would challenge everything. She grinned to herself, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and excitement. All right, Galaxy, let's see what you got next. As the screen faded to black, the whispered change spread to the cosmos like wildfire, and the universe, already forever altered, braced for what Yara Kallian would do next.